Right, it seems those numbers are levelling off, so shall we get started? For those of you who have just joined, welcome. This is the launch of the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. My name's Geri Scott. I'm the Yorkshire Post Westminster correspondent. And you might have seen some information about the commission on our front page today because we're really excited to be involved, and I'm really excited to see so many people here tonight as well. Look, before we start, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the commission and kind of what it is, because I know when I first heard about it, I was a little bit perplexed at what kind of the aims were and what the commission hopes to do. But obviously, it's really, really important. So, look, let me just tell you a little bit about it. The commission's an independent advisory body, which is really important to stress, and it's bringing together some leaders and experts from, well, really across the region about this kind of aim, this inclusive climate action that needs to be taken. We all know this is going to be key for our future, and Gouldson, who you'll hear from in a little while, said on our front page today, you know, this is one of the most serious threats facing our region in coming years, so we know it's important. The commission is going to help the region to adapt really to the issues that are being caused by climate change and cut its carbon emissions, but also to do this in a really fair and sustainable way, which we know is going to be so important. This is the first commission, was the Leeds Climate Commission, actually, but this one is going to be the largest of its kind, which is really, really good for the region, really good for everyone who is involved. But there are now, I think, more than 10 across the UK. I know we've got them in Kirklees, I mentioned Leeds, Doncaster, York, Harrogate as well. So they're really stacking up and people are getting involved. But, you know, Yorkshire has a population of, what, 5.5 million, I regularly say in my articles that's population bigger than Scotland. So it's really important to have something for the whole region as well. And the number of people here tonight just shows how important everyone thinks it is. So this is jointly funded by the Yorkshire and Humber Leaders Board, the Environment Agency, Yorkshire Water, the Northern Power Grid, Northern Gas Networks and the University of Leeds, plus the TEC, Yorkshire Universities and the University of Leeds have made in-kind contributions too. So I think that gives you a bit of an overview to begin with, but you're going to hear loads from various speakers tonight who can hopefully explain it a little bit better than I can. So look, let's have a look at how tonight's going to go. You're listening to me waffle on for your welcome now, and we'll move on from that pretty sharpish, but we're going to go through all these various topics with different speakers. There's a short film in the middle for you, which is really, really, someone described it earlier as classy, which I think is a really good description of it. There's a comfort break at 7:20, and then there's loads and loads of time for questions at the end, which is really good because this is all about what you guys want to know, right? But you will notice there is half an hour for questions. That's plenty of time kind of in relation for tonight, but we're expecting that you'll have quite a few questions left over. So there will be events in the future, which I'll be able to tell you about later as well if we don't get to your question. On that topic, the way that you can ask questions is, and again, I'm sure you're more than used to this by now, there's a Q&A box right at the bottom, and you can ask your questions at any time they pop into your head. And even if you don't want to ask a question, I'd really encourage you to have a look at what other people are asking, and if you're interested in it, give it an upvote, because as I say, we're going to have a lot of interest tonight. We're not going to get to every question, unfortunately, so those that get to the top are going to be the ones that we can focus on. You should have got a notification, but if not, this is being recorded and will be shared after the event as well. And there is a chat function at the bottom as well. So if something goes wrong or you need to talk to one of us, then do let us know. And we do have, yes, a hashtag, which is hashtag Yorkshire Climate, for you to tweet along, and you can see the different Twitter handles as well. I think that's probably enough from me for now, because you're going to be seeing my face far too often tonight. And we can move on to the first bit of our session, and this is introducing the commission. We've got Carl Les from North Yorkshire County Council, we've got Wallace Sampson from Harrogate, and we've got Liz Barber, who is the chair of the Climate Commission for this section. And we're going to go to Carl Les, leader of North Yorkshire Council and chair of the Yorkshire and Humber Leaders Board first. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Geri, and good evening, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be part of this very welcome initiative. As I say, I'm very pleased to be here, but I think more importantly, my children will be very pleased that I'm here. Can I just make a small but rather important correction, please, Geri? I am actually, in fact, the Conservative co-chair of the Yorkshire and Humber Leaders Board. For balance and good cross-party working, there is a Labour co-chair as well. And it was Judith Blake until her elevation to the House of Lords recently, and a new appointee will be announced next week. I'm sure that good working relationships will continue. In fact, Yorkshire leaders have always worked together on a large number of issues, ever since local authority boundary lines were drawn on maps. To paraphrase the words of the late Joe Cox MP, there is far much more that joins us together than divides us. Irrespective of which colour team we support, there are some issues that cross political boundaries and geographical ones too. And I think climate is perhaps one of the most exemplar of that. For example, rainwater that lands in Conservative North Yorkshire can cause problems and consequences for Lib Dem and Green York and Labour West Yorkshire. What a nonsense it would be if we said that that wasn't a shared issue. And there's no boundary to climate change. There may be a huge difference of opinion between some people about climate change, but not us here tonight. The question to ask is it happening? And then what can we do together to mitigate it and solve it? We've answered that first question in the affirmative by being here. We expect the next question to be answered by the Commission's discussions and its findings. The Yorkshire and Humber Leaders Board is very pleased to support this initiative, both financially, but more importantly, politically as well. Thank you, Geri.
Thank you so much, Carl. And I think the message that you gave there of kind of doing this together is something that really everyone that's here tonight is showing, because there are so many different representations from our speakers tonight, and it seems like everyone's on the same page. So that's really, really positive. I suppose without further ado, we can move on to Wallace Sampson, who is the Chief Executive of Harrogate Borough Council. Wallace.
Thanks, Geri. I have to say I'm delighted to say a few words on behalf of the local authority chief execs in my capacity as the chief executive leading the region for low carbon. I was trying to think back, and if I recall correctly, I think it was back in October 2019 that the Yorkshire Leaders Board had a discussion about our climate challenge and accepted that the urgency of the situation required a need to approach this differently so that it had the involvement and the commitment from the region as a whole. To be clear though, local authorities across Yorkshire and the Humber already had at that point a commitment to carbon neutrality at the local level. Whilst there are varying dates for achieving it, all commitments are ahead of the government's 2050 target, and the majority are between 2030 and 2038. At the regional level, we know that if we continue business as usual, the carbon budget for the region to 2050 will have been used up within the next 6 years. But the size of our region presents an opportunity to collaborate at a significant scale. And that's why we've committed as a region to achieve net zero carbon by 2038, recognizing that some areas may achieve this earlier and others later, due to the nature of their individual economies and specific assets and characteristics. So it was on this basis that the Yorkshire Leaders Board first discussed exploring a climate change commission at their meeting in January 2020, and then signed off support for a specific proposal with the commitment to funding actually in October last year. Now, since then, the progress that has been made has been nothing short of extraordinary, really. And I do have to pay particular praise to Andy Gouldson from Leeds University and Polly Cook from Leeds City Council, who have been really at the heart of this right from the start. Quite frankly, I don't think that we would be where we are now without their input and support. And actually, most of the time, my role as the lead chief exec has been just to get out of the way but to be there to support them when it's been required. And so I just want to finish by stressing the importance of collaboration. The creation of a regional climate commission is an opportunity that we've all got to grasp. By working collaboratively, central and local government, public, private, and the third sector, education, and other bodies can co-develop solutions. This is, I think, an opportunity for the Yorkshire and Humber region as a whole to be national exemplars and to develop innovative approaches to our climate and zero carbon ambitions. But the size of the challenge is so large that everyone has to be on board. It can only be achieved through a collaborative approach, and I hope that through this commission, we can meet the commitment that was actually agreed by the Yorkshire leaders. Thanks, Geri.
Thank you, Wallace. I think that's a very kind of apt message. It, builds off what Carl was saying, that really this has to be an effort that we all take together, and it's the only way that it's going to be tackled. So you're quite right. I said at the start that we've got loads of people here, and Liz in the section in the question and answers has quite rightly pointed out that I didn't actually tell you how many, so I'm ever so sorry. There are around 400 people on the webinar tonight, so it's a really kind of vote of confidence in what the Commission are doing, so that's really, really exciting. Off the back of that, I'm going to bring in Liz Barber, who is the CEO of Yorkshire Water and also the chair of the Commission. So Liz, over to you.
Thank you very much, Geri, and thank you to all those attendees. I'm absolutely delighted that so many people have shown so much interest in this evening. So as Geri says, my day job is Chief Executive of Yorkshire Water. I also sit on a board of another water company, and I sit on the board of Leeds University. I came to Leeds as a student. I studied geography and climate change about 100 years ago. I'm passionate about this region, and I'm passionate about climate change. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have been able to fulfill this role of chair of the Commission. It absolutely goes to the heart of everything I stand for. So I'm utterly delighted. I would just like to really talk about three things to tell you about the Commission, really. Climate emergency in Yorkshire and the Humber, what the Commission is here to do, and very, very importantly, actually, how the Commission is going to work. So, climate emergency here in the Yorkshire and Humber area. As Chief Executive of a water company, we are very close to the impacts of climate change, but nevertheless, we need to be close there to the impacts of climate change. It affects our business on a daily basis, but it is affecting so much more of Yorkshire than water supply. Since 2018, so 2 and a bit years, we've had 4 named storms here in Yorkshire, which have brought flooding and significant damage to local communities from Calderdale to South Yorkshire. And of course, there has been a history of flooding in the whole region. We've had 2 freeze-thaw events, the Beast from the East in February 2018, and a difficult winter, a cold and prolonged winter this winter. Last year, during the pandemic, we had a very long, dry, sunny period. Great for getting outside, but not great for water supply and water resilience and for biodiversity. And of course, that was only 2 years after the last significant drought, which followed the Beast from the East. And of course, it's not just water supply, it's resilience of infrastructure, it's flooding of homes. And of course, back in 2018, we had significant peatland destruction through wildfires. Very, very important to our net carbon targets that we actually look after our peatlands. So there are other aspects of climate change here across our region. So, but we're part of the problem. Even though it affects us in such a significant way, we are contributing to this problem. We spend £10 billion a year on energy, and we emit in Yorkshire, all 5 million of us or so, more than 8 different EU member states. There's a lot to do. But actually, we have an economy here that will be vastly affected by this. There are very positive signs. We can save £2 billion a year. By not spending so much an energy, we can help to tackle fuel poverty, we can improve public health, and we can create about 33,000 good jobs through a low carbon transition. But it's very difficult to go from one phase to another, and we've got to protect and look after those who will be adversely impacted by a transition that isn't managed well. So we're in a climate emergency. So what do we have to do? We have to do a lot, and we have to do it quickly. So the Commission has assembled itself around 4 key aims: climate resilience and adaptation to climate risks across the region, to progress towards the net zero carbon emissions targets that Wallace talked about a moment ago, very importantly, to a just and inclusive transition behind climate actions that leaves nobody behind here in Yorkshire, and sustainability. We have an amazing landscape, an amazing biodiversity, and globally important peatlands here in Yorkshire, and we've really got to look after those. So there is a 4th element, which is specifically looking after protecting nature and biodiversity. So what we'll do is we'll support local actions within the region whilst promoting within the region, whilst promoting Yorkshire and the Humber nationally. And of course, the first big job is to feed that into COP26 in the autumn. And we'll be looking to hold a Yorkshire and Humber climate summit, which will be very inclusive in order to prepare us all for that. A little bit more about that in a moment. So how will the Commission work? Well, it needs to be very Yorkshire and Humber. It needs to be distinctive. We need to be fair and inclusive. To Carl's point earlier on, this is not political. This is about helping everybody in Yorkshire. We're going to bring together the most amazing array of climate expertise and relevant expertise in the Commission. More about that in a moment. But we need to make sure that we bring in the voices that are very often not even heard, let alone listened to make sure that we are responding to everybody and listening to everybody in the region in the right way. So our job is to support, guide, track the ambition of climate actions across the region. And we'll fulfill this by bringing people together, by allowing and supporting constructive, open and transparent debate, by making sure we've got strong evidence base, by promoting best practice and helping build capabilities and reviewing progress against the targets. There are already some amazing success stories from the region on the website, 50 or so, but we need so much more, and we need to do so much more. There is so much more to do. This is a massive challenge. So to support, we've got an amazing team of commissioners from right across the region, representing every sector. So in the public sector, we've got the local authorities, the Environment Agency, NHS, universities, schools. In the private sector, we've got energy, transport, food, housing, manufacturing, investment, innovation, media, water. And the third sector, we have wildlife, environment, education, communities, and the TUC. We have great union representation on the Commission as well, which is leading the charge on just transition. So to help this, there's so much to do with setting up a range of panels. So we discussed that at the meeting earlier on. And one new panel that came out was actually to think about community engagement. Minority communities, people who aren't normally listened to. It was a great build and a very exciting development. But as Geri mentioned earlier on, we'll be running public engagement events. Geri will talk about that a little bit more later on. We're very keen to listen, we're very keen to learn, and we're very keen for as many people to be involved as possible. So in conclusion, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible in the future work of the Commission. It's great that so many people are interested in this. It is sobering to realise that we've only got a couple of meetings before we hope to go to COP26. So we'll need everybody's support on the Commission and all of those here today who have an interest. Let's get on with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And I was really glad actually that you said that there were kind of 4 key aims, because I think so often with these things you can have really kind of ambitious and worthy targets, but if you can't kind of, you know, work towards something, it can be really difficult to focus the mind. So I think that's That's really, really helpful, especially to begin with, to have that clear focus and those clear aims. So we're going to move on to our next section now, which is really outlining what the climate challenge is to the UK. We've got a couple of speakers. We've got Lord Deben, we've got Emma Howard-Boyd, and we've got Dan Jarvis as well. I noticed that someone in the Q&As had asked for all the speakers to be listed. We've now done that in the chat, and the chat is now enabled for attendees as well. But if you can continue to put your questions in the Q&A box and upvote the ones you want, we can make sure that we get to them in the end, and then you can use the chat for any tech issues. So I'm going to bring in Lord Deben now, who is chair of the UK's Climate Change Committee. I think you may be muted.
There we are. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here because I'm very concerned to recommend the Yorkshire and Humberside Climate Change Commission, because it is in Yorkshire that the whole concept of local climate change commissions was really created. And I'm very pleased to see Andy Gouldson here, because he is, if I may say this, the father of them all. And what has happened in Leeds, as the chief executive of Harrogate said, it must be one of the rare occasions in which the chief executive of Harrogate is so charming about Leeds. But the truth is, it is a huge success. And the relationship between the university, the local council, and the civic community has been exemplary. And as a result of that, we have tried to spread that concept around the country. The government has given some money to an organisation called PCAN, which I chair, and that means we've now got similar institutions going in Belfast, in Edinburgh, and in a number of other places, including Bristol and Cambridge. And I hope that in the end, all the university towns will have that kind of commission, that fascinating link between the university input and the academic rigor and the local council seeking to do locally what the government has committed itself to do centrally. But that isn't enough. And the Yorkshire and Humberside Climate Commission will set an example in the country as a whole for larger and regional commissions, because in the end, we are only going to achieve our end if local government and regional government play their important part. And of course, as Liz Barber knows very well, it's not just a matter of local government, it's all the institutions, whether they be water companies or individual manufacturers, schools, churches, a whole range of institutions have to work together, because otherwise we don't win this battle. Now, I'm not going to do a rant about how dangerous climate change is, because everybody, now well over 400 people who are on this call, know perfectly well that this is the most dangerous material threat to our existence that exists. I mean, there's no point in arguing about it. We either do something about it or it does something fundamental to us. And it's a challenge to humanity, because if we can't do something about it, we have failed to reach the standards which human beings ought to. And of course, it's our fault. There's no point either of hiding that. There's a wonderful comment in the great papal encyclical of Francis, Laudato Si, when he says, climate change is the symptom of what we have done to the world. And the disease is what we've done to the world in reducing the biodiversity which we have been given, in reducing the fertility of our soils by the way in which we have farmed, the way in which we have treated other people and the poverty which that has resulted in, the kind of concept where we have polluted the atmosphere and the soil itself. All those are the things which have contributed towards climate change. And it's that symptom that we are concentrating on here in this commission. But you don't, when you want a cure, deal with the symptoms. You have to deal with the disease. And that's why it is for all of us to deal with the pollution we individually cause, the emissions which we individually put out, and which we corporately do too. So it's the way that our pensions are invested, the way we ourselves invest, the way we live, the way we work, and the way we take our leisure. All these things we have to take seriously. If I were to tell you what my biggest problem with the government is, it's not about party politics, because there is, I'm happy to say, a real cross-party consensus in Westminster and I believe around the country, and you are an example of it. No, the real difficulty with government is making it understand that fighting climate change is not just the job of BEIS or of DEFRA or of the Prime Minister. It's just as much a job as the Department of Education, the Department of Work, and the Department of even of Culture, Media and Sport. Every single part of government has got to put the battle against climate change at the centre of what it does. That's why I was particularly pleased that the Chancellor of the Exchequer has now redefined what the role of the Bank of England is, because at the heart of it is the need to reach net zero by 2050. And of course, as Liz Barber rightly said, we are moving towards the COP26. And what I would end by saying is that you can do a great deal to make that COP work. It's going to be crucial. I had a meeting last week with John Kerry, the wonderfully progressive spokesman on climate change from the United States. And what a joy it is that the United States has now rejoined the world after 4 years' absence. And he made yet again the point that this is the last chance we've got to win this battle. In Paris, every country in the world signed up to fight. Now we have got to make sure that the battle is really engaged and every country in the world signs up to making their contribution to what is a global issue. But global issues are not just solved globally. They are solved nationally, locally, and individually. And I very much welcome the Yorkshire and Humberside Climate Change Commission, because without its work, we're not going to win this battle.
Thank you. It's a fascinating context setting in where we sit and where the government is and where we are globally. And I think that's a very important kind of aspect to have in where this commission can sit in that wider context as well. So that's really, really illuminating. We're going to move on to Emma Howard-Boyd, who is the chair of the Environment Agency, who I'm sure will be able to give us some more insight. Emma, over to you. Oh, Emma, I think you might be on mute. Sorry. Looks like we're having a little bit of trouble with Emma's sound. So whilst she's getting that sorted, can we move on just for a second and we'll come back to you, Emma.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we've got you. Go ahead. Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. There was something wrong with my headphones then. So apologies, everyone. And Geri, thanks for the introduction. I had the chance to catch up with Oliver Harmer, our area director, who is sitting on the commission. I know you had your first meeting this afternoon, and he was telling me how much energy there is around the table. The Olympic Games may or may not happen this year, but in 2012, Yorkshire won 7 gold medals, 2 silver and 3 bronzes. If it was an independent country, it would have come 12th in the medal table. This year, the UK hosts the COP26 climate negotiations, and there's an opportunity for Yorkshire and the Humber to be an international leader once again. Earlier this month, Leeds was announced as the home of the new National Infrastructure Bank, with £12 billion as well as £10 billion in loan guarantees to invest in public and private infrastructure projects. The bank aims to drive the government's plans for a green industrial revolution while supporting local and regional economic growth. In the same city, the Leeds Flood Alleviation Scheme is one of the largest river flood defence schemes in the country, with the most ambitious natural flood management programme throughout the catchment upstream. So where better to demonstrate the benefits of climate resilient infrastructure? Where better to realise the economic opportunities in reaching net zero? Where in the world is better than Yorkshire? The climate emergency will affect all of us. By 2050, there will be 59% more winter rainfall, and summer temperatures are set to be up to 7.4 degrees hotter. It is well known that Jarvis, who's speaking next, was a paratrooper, and that the regiment's motto is Utrinque Paratus, which means ready for anything. With the climate emergency set to bring both predictable and unpredictable shocks, we need our infrastructure, our economy, and our communities to be more resilient. We all need to be ready for anything. That's why it is vital that the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission's approach recognises the importance of both reducing emissions and helping people prepare for climate shocks. The National Infrastructure Bank aims to generate private investment towards £40 billion in infrastructure spending by creating investable markets. Regulation underpins these markets by providing monitoring, which provides assurance that companies are meeting environmental targets. In 2019, the Environment Agency delivered over 98% compliance in the 5 major energy efficiency and emissions trading schemes that we administer. They cover over 40% of the UK's carbon emissions from industry, business, and the public sector. And as we reduce emissions, we must also adapt. As part of the National Flood and Coastal Erosion Strategy, the Environment Agency are developing long-term adaptive pathways in 4 locations, including Yorkshire and the Humber, respectively, to ensure that the investments we are making today are resilient to tomorrow's climate. Part of this involves nature-based solutions, and we are developing ambitious programmes across Yorkshire and Humber. One example is at the Aldborough Flats on the south bank of the Humber estuary. This landscape increases climate resilience to thousands of people and nationally important infrastructure, as well as protecting wildlife. Another place where investment in nature could lead to wider benefits is at the River Wharfe at Ilkley. At the end of last year, the government decided to make it the first river to get bathing water status in England. Sorting this will take time, investment, collaboration and cooperation to meet standards, but it's huge news for water quality. It's good for people's health, and it's another gold medal for Yorkshire. The famous investor in coronavirus vaccines, Dolly Parton, once said, "If your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader." The climate emergency will be experienced by everyone, but as an industrial powerhouse with a glorious natural environment, Yorkshire and the Humber's leadership in managing climate change could and should be a beacon to the rest of the world. I wish the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission every success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. I'm sure the Environment Agency will be a key part of this. I know I often speak to you guys whenever we're talking about flooding and looking at, you know, the devastating events that, you know, we tend to report on at the Yorkshire Post, but clearly the resilience aspect and going forward and everything you've spoken about there is absolutely key as well. If I could just remind everybody to be getting your questions in the Q&A or upvote the ones that you like. I'm keeping an eye on them and we'll be getting to them really soon. So I'm going to hand over to Dan Jarvis now, who is MP for Barnsley Central, but also Mayor for the Sheffield City region. Dan.
Thank you, Geri. It's a pleasure to follow Emma, and I'm delighted to be here. And I completely agreed with what my good Yorkshire Leaders Board colleague, Councillor Carl Les, said at the beginning of his opening remarks. This isn't about party politics. This is about us coming together to work together across Yorkshire. I'm really excited at the potential of what we can achieve. I'm delighted to be a Vice Chair of the Commission, not least because this initiative is about one of the key elements we need for an effective response to climate change. Because we cannot just do this from the top down, we have to also do it from the bottom up. And I want Yorkshire to be a leader on the road to net zero. That's not just because climate change threatens us as it does the rest of the world, but for me, the positive case for change is just as strong. Converting to a sustainable economy is not a cost to be borne, it is an opportunity to be seized. Now, that opportunity is partly economic. I see the shift to clean industry as a powerful tool to help us towards the higher value, higher tech, higher productivity local economy we need to see. In South Yorkshire, we have companies at the cutting edge of decarbonisation, like ITM Power, developing clean hydrogen power, and Magtech, a leader on electrical vehicle drivetrains. Our Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre and Translational Energy Research Centre are leading the charge for technological change. The AMRC is part of a groundbreaking bid to speed up the decarbonisation of industry on the Humber. By 2050, there could be more than 1 million low carbon and renewable energy jobs across the UK. And I want us here in Yorkshire to have a significant piece of that pie. But the opportunity is also a social one. The transition is a chance to reduce the injustice inherent in the way the costs of both climate change and air pollution have been borne, especially if the costs of the transition itself are fairly distributed. Poor air quality, which is closely linked to carbon emissions, is implicated in 36,000 deaths a year in the UK and disproportionately affects more disadvantaged people and parts of the country. Poor public transport, which has similar links, is a substantial brake on social mobility as well as quality of life. A net zero future is intimately linked to a wider vision for a better and more just society, stronger, greener, and fairer. And that's why we've been pursuing it. We've set a net zero goal of 2040 at the latest, and we're refining the practical roadmap to get us there. We're investing massively in cycling and walking, a projected total of 87 million between 2020 and 2023, making active travel a core part of our transport strategy. We're about to embark on the first steps of what I intend to be an ambitious reform and reinvigoration of our bus services, including decarbonising our fleet. And we've just made a £10 million down payment on that, including buying our first electric vehicles and providing a year of discounted fares to get young people back on the buses. We're planting trees and we're reforming our procurement so the money we spend incentivises carbon reduction. Perhaps most significantly, we've established a South Yorkshire Renewal Fund of up to £500 million. A slice of that will go towards net zero measures like retrofits. The active role we're playing, along with our local authorities, shows how inescapably important local government is for the net zero transition. We have critical responsibilities from transport to housing. We know our areas and our industries better than anyone in Whitehall, and we can innovate and iterate much more flexibly. So the regional element is particularly important. It provides a vital link between the local and the national, and Yorkshire and the Humber is the right scale for much of the work that is needed, because it's on this scale that much of the best work is being done around the world. But the great limitation on fulfilling this huge potential is central government. We're trying, but ultimately we need the funds and the powers to act with the ambition that is needed. We need a partnership, but that doesn't mean that Whitehall can escape the need to invest the resources that match the scale and the urgency of the crisis. So the case for this commission is crystal clear. We need it to help coordinate our efforts, and we need it to provide a voice both in Westminster and at COP26. Above all, we need it to realise the huge potential of our region. At this stage, any other path is a luxury we simply cannot afford. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. And I think that echoes a lot of the conversations that actually you and I have really often about devolution and how, you know, these decisions, these place-based solutions are really best, the decisions are made by the people that are there, which is why it's so great to see this regional commission. So look, that takes us to the end of our kind of scene setting section on the UK's climate challenge. And we're going to be seeing a short film next, which is really, really good, actually. It's a premiere of this film. It's the first time it's been seen. I saw a little snippet of it yesterday. Very excited to see the rest, and hopefully it gives you a bit more of an introduction to what the Commission will be doing.
The climate crisis is not just ice melting in the Arctic, or vast areas of rainforest chopped down every year in the Amazon. Here in Yorkshire, intense floods regularly devastate our communities, while uncontrolled fires frequently damage our famous moors. Even our crops are suffering. This isn't somebody else's problem, it's ours. I've been a weather forecaster in Yorkshire for 25 years. I know the climate well, and it's changing fast. When we talk about our climate, it's not about whether it's sunny or rainy today, but about the long-term changes to our planet's atmosphere. Humans are so efficient at digging up and burning fossil fuels, we've caused the whole world to get hotter, and this is affecting people's lives right here. Extreme weather such as floods, storms and wildfires are now so much more likely than they were just 30 years ago. The extraordinary heat we experienced in 2020 was 50 times more likely because of how we have caused the Earth's climate to change. There's more than 5 million people living in Yorkshire and the Humber, and we spend £10 billion a year on energy, much of it still from fossil fuels, which makes us part of the problem. But we are proud people who value our heritage and environment, and I'd argue we live in the most beautiful county in England. We have a history of pulling together, and that's now more important than ever as we face the challenge of tackling climate change throughout our region. Much has been done already, but a new initiative aims to catalyse and engage everyone across our region through the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. They've recruited a team of commissioners from a huge range of sectors who have been brought together with two main aims. The first is to build our resilience and help us adapt to the risks of climate change so that we can cope with what's to come. Their second aim is to enable us to play our part in cutting our carbon emissions and helping to ensure that the UK can meet its target of net zero emissions by 2050. But this isn't about box ticking. It's about making Yorkshire and the Humber a fairer, cleaner, better place to live. And there are already countless inspiring climate success stories from right across our county. People working together in communities, government and business, on energy, buildings, transport, nature and food. The Living with Water initiative is creating natural flood bowls to help protect Hull, while beavers have been reintroduced to help prevent flooding in North Yorkshire. There's thousands of hectares of woodland being planted to help create the White Rose Forest, sucking up carbon, protecting against floods and supporting biodiversity. Sheffield has led the way with its tram system, and new electric buses and scooters are being pioneered to cut carbon and improve air quality in York. Energised Barnsley is reducing carbon and improving lives through innovative community solar projects, while Leeds has created a district heating scheme to decarbonise homes and buildings across the city. This isn't just about making the right decisions in our own lives, but about changing our institutions and about the types of jobs that we do. This means providing people with well-paid green jobs as we shift polluting industries towards a healthier and more sustainable way of doing business. We can all help to make Yorkshire and the Humber a better place to live, not just for us and our children, but for nature and the wildlife in our beautiful region. It's part of our Yorkshire spirit to rise to new challenges, to look after our own and make sure no one and nowhere gets left behind. The Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission will help our region to step up our efforts responding to the climate crisis, but it needs your help to be successful. It's time to work together to help secure a better future for us all.
That was a really interesting piece of footage, and I want to thank everyone who provided footage for the film, and also to Paul Hudson for presenting it, because I think it really gives a brilliant overview to what the Commission is trying to achieve, and also to everyone that has helped bring the success stories together. And they're on the new website, which is yorksandhumberclimate.org.uk. And if you haven't seen those yet, you can log on to have a look. Look, now we're going to take a quick comfort break, so you guys can run off and make a cup of tea or pop to the loo or whatever it is that you need to do. It's getting about the time where blood sugar runs low, so you might want to grab a chocolate biscuit or something like that. And we will be back dead on 7:30, and we'll see you then. Thank you all so much for coming back. Hopefully you are all refreshed and we can get on with the rest of the evening. Now, before the film and our little break, we heard about the national challenge of the climate emergency. And now we're going to hear a little bit more about Yorkshire and the Humber's challenge. We're going to be hearing from a youth representative before we hear from some of our commissioners. So I would like to introduce Will Solomon, who is from the Regional Youth Climate Assembly. Will.
Hi, thanks for having me. So as Geri said, I'm from RECA, which is the Regional Youth Climate Assembly. We were going to be the Yorkshire and Humber Youth Climate Assembly, but so quite frankly, YHICA sort of doesn't flow as well as RECA. So we started back up in April last year, and our sort of goal was to sort of unite youth climate action. Because quite often people would do great work in their region, but it'd sort of get limited by area or by resources. And we wanted to bring people together. And so our first sort of big act was to make our manifesto, which is 12 pledges, see what we want to see happen and what we want to work towards. So these are stuff from carbon-friendly construction, transport, new green jobs, investment in green tech, climate protection, so, flood defences. And we've sort of been growing in size over the past few months. And one of the things we're working towards in COP26 is with Leeds Uni and a South Africa project, where what we're going to do is we're working with a summit with South Africa. So we're going to have 2 conventions in April, and it's all around water. And because we have floods and coastal erosion, and in South Africa, they have droughts. And it's that sort of idea of climate change will affect everyone differently, but it'll affect everyone. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do videos, sort of a minute or so videos by young people. I'm going to send them in, hopefully. And then we're going to make a big video, 3 videos, in fact. The first one is going to be shown at I think it's the Odeon during COP26 week. And this is with the UK and South Africa submissions sort of showing the comparison. And then we're going to have 2 other ones, which are going to be sort of the separate UK and South Africa ones, which are going to be shown at their sort of, tense areas during COP26. We're also working with the Decarbonate group on their academic research panel. So about funding, where that goes, it's around transport and climate change in the north. And then sort of one of the areas we wanted to bring up was, so in Calderdale, there's something called the ACE Award, which is the Advocates for the Climate and Environment. It's another acronym we probably spent way too long trying to figure out. But this is a sort of school accreditation based around climate change, about reducing the buildings emissions, but also introducing upskilling, green jobs, education. And so it's been trialled in Calderdale and then hopefully expanded through RECA. But what we kind of want to see, and what we'd love to see from the Commission, is working with RECA where we can, and then to see something like RECA, not RECA, like the ACE Award, to go from just schools to all public buildings, to businesses. And that's what we think this panel, this could do. It could be a great force for good in Yorkshire and Humber for climate change and for promoting smaller projects, for really getting stuff going. And I don't know where this is going to go in the next few months, but hopefully it's going to be up from here. And that's really all I've got to say. Just good luck.
Thank you, Will. Thank you so much for that. It's really good to hear that that kind of the Youth Climate Assembly is going to have such a good representation at COP26. I think that's absolutely key. So thank you so much for telling us about it and for your time. We're going to move on to speak to some of our commissioners now. And the first one is Beckie Hart, who is the Regional Director for the CBI. So Beckie, can I hand over to you?
Yes, of course. I'm delighted to take part in the launch of the Commission tonight, not just because it's important to me personally, because actually the desire to be more sustainable, to decarbonise and really help the country achieve its net zero target does actually come up in every conversation I have with business, regardless of sector, size and geography. This year is a huge year for UK climate leadership as we host the G7 and COP26, and the CBI hosts the B7. And climate, we know, will be an important topic at the G7 in June, and this will really build momentum towards COP26, where the Paris Agreement signatory countries, which now obviously include the USA once again, will really need to demonstrate their plans for achieving the commitments that they agreed to in Paris in 2015. And so whilst those targets may be set at national and international level, they are going to absolutely need to be delivered at a local and regional one, which I think is why the launch of the Commission today is so timely. Our region, and specifically the Humber, is the largest carbon emitter in the UK. If the Humber doesn't decarbonise, the country doesn't decarbonise. So whilst we've already made some great progress in decarbonising our power, power isn't the only area we need to consider. So transport, whether that be shipping, rail, or hitting the UK's 2030 target to phase out the sale of conventional petrol and diesel cars and vans, that can't be ignored, nor how we heat our homes or make them more energy efficient. We also can't forget the decarbonisation of our industrial processes, but also how we really need to change our personal behaviours. So bearing all that in mind, it's really not hard to see why this is a whole economy challenge and will need a whole economy response. So I think the businesses in this region and nationally are all at very different stages of that decarbonisation journey, with some very well advanced with a really clear plan, and others just knowing it's the right thing to do, but just really not sure where to start. And I think the Climate Commission can really help galvanise that business ambition on climate by showcasing what organisations across the region are doing, but also supporting the really ambitious domestic and international policy development that's going to be needed ahead of COP26. So I think there's three things that stand out for me: policy levers, practical advice and partnership. So by learning more from the organisations engaging with the Commission can develop sort of policy positions based on the evidence of what's happening right here in our region. So for example, it's important that the clean air strategy is supported by a commitment to put the right infrastructure in place so that organisations can make the investment necessary, knowing that they'll still actually be able to operate. And I think, as Lord Deben mentioned, the siloed nature of policy making is going to need to transition itself to something a lot more collaborative, really truly reflecting those sort of interdependencies between sectors. So whilst the government's 10-point plan was a start, and whilst it's not a net zero plan by any means, it is the green light for more detailed policy. And I do believe the Commission, as the largest one of its type in the country, sort of can and should help shape that policy. I do think it's previously been underestimated is just how important practical advice is going to be to help businesses on their decarbonisation journey. We've just finished our regional council round, and it's really evident that leadership, sector, size, client or supply chain demand will all influence that transition, but it's practical advice that'll really help speed it up. And I think the Commission can really help our region's businesses by becoming a sort of hub of practical advice. It makes good business sense not to reinvent the wheel every time when we've got practical examples on our doorstep. So just let's ensure that we share them. And I think probably the most important are the partnerships that are already being forged, but are going to need to be strengthened as we take this really challenging journey. Partnerships between government and business, business and academia, rural and urban, public sector and private sector. The list does go on. And I think the Commission's mission is to demonstrate the importance of those partnerships, show how they can work. And I know that us and our members are really keen to get involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Beckie. And I think that point about the Commission potentially being able to offer advice to business is really, really invaluable, because it sounds like from what you're saying that, you know, business wants to make this move, it hasn't already, but just maybe needs a bit of a helping hand to know how. So yeah, I'm sure that's something that'll be picked up later on as well. I think we heard from Liz earlier that there is a lot of trade union involvement in the Commission, and our next Commission to speak is Bill Adams, who is the Regional Secretary for the TUC in Yorkshire and the Humber. Bill.
Well, thanks, Geri, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak at this event, celebrating the establishment of the Climate Commission. I too would like to thank our Yorkshire leaders for having the vision and resolve to tackle climate change. It just shows, and Carl Les started by opening by saying, by cooperating together, you can achieve far more than you can in silos or alone. For those who don't know me, my name is Bill Adams. I'm Regional Secretary of the Trade Union Congress in the region. We represent over 600,000 members in 48 unions and have a presence in every sector in the economy. I'm a member of the Sheffield City Region Local Enterprise Board. I'm also a Skills Commissioner for West Yorkshire, and I sit on the Bays Committee for Powering Past Coal, and I'm a member of the Trade Union Energy Democracy Group. So you can imagine how much time I spend talking about climate change. So I'm delighted to be appointed as a member of the Commission, a body which has a wide range of business expertise, academics, third sector, all working together with politicians of all colours to drive forward a route to a new sustainable and green economy. In our race to make those changes necessary to stabilise the planet and ensure a better future for our children, we need to work together like never before to set in train a revolution in industrial methods, new technology, transport systems, food production, housing and urban planning in what are going to be monumental changes to the way we live our lives in the next 10 to 20 years. At the heart of all these considerations are people and communities and an urgent need for a just and fair transition. I have to say, in the past, history has taught this region well in how not to deindustrialise whole industries, how not to close down major industries such as coal and steel, which employed tens of thousands of people and tens of thousands more in support industries with no plan B. We must never again in the future abandon whole swathes of our communities on the altar of profit before people. This commission, something we at the TUC have been calling now for a number of years, is a small step in helping employers and unions in planning for a sustainable green future. A future where our industries can be as productive as the best in the world, where workers enjoy high incomes and good conditions, and also security that not only attracts people to our region, but provides opportunities for our local communities, many of them who've been left behind, some have even been abandoned, to prosper in their own community instead of having to move away or face a life on benefits. We have a history in this country of avoiding social partnership and dialogue, something I've found to be of great benefit as I've worked in other countries engaged on a similar path to net zero. We always achieve more when we cooperate and work together. Yet many workers are so sceptical about embracing change. Why wouldn't they be? They've got a history of being used to hearing that they're no longer required to go to work, sometime on a TV news bulletin, or even by means of text messages whilst they've been on their way. We've witnessed industrial strife in this region so many times for the want of adopting a partnership approach. Well, the time has come, colleagues, to think and act differently. All our futures depend on it. Many European companies and trade unions have reached long-term sectoral agreements with the help of the governments to overcome the fears of workers threatened by fundamental change. I'm sure that all our commissioners and all our regional politicians are committed to that change in a fair and just way. Every single business, every worker, how we live, how we travel, what we eat will be affected by climate change. At every stage of the way, no one should be left behind. The transition to a green, zero carbon region must be a just one. Just transition runs through every seam of change. It must be informed by good research and data collection. Our research partners are already assisting the TUC and will assist the Commission with the relevant detail to help us make informed decisions and actions. We must all have a stake in the future. It's our chance to improve the lives of everyone in the region. Together we can make things better, improve our economy, our services, the lives of our children and the future of our planet. We must also invest in education and skills to prepare our young people to be able, by increased apprenticeship offers, to take the high-skilled jobs of the future. We must start now to negotiate and plan long-term agreements for industrial and commercial transition by sitting down together at sectoral level, achieving pathways leading to future agreements and security for all. We can do this together. The trade union movement is ready to play its part. Let's get working. Thanks, Geri.
Thanks, Bill. And I know that one of the points you made there about, making sure that this is a just transition is shared by the Commission, because Andy told us that. Andy told us that on our front page today for the Yorkshire Post, and he said, Yorkshire knows what it's like to have a brutal, he described it as, transition. So a need to avoid that. So thank you very much. We're going to go to our third Commissioner next, which is Rachael Bice, who is the Chief Executive of the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. Rachael.
Hi there, thank you, Geri. Yeah, I'm a privileged position to be the Chief Executive of Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, which was set up 75 years ago by some Yorkshire folk who recognised that humans were making pressures on nature that couldn't be sustained, and that we needed to do something about it. Oh, have I not started? Sorry, I've somehow flicked my video off. Apologies for that. Yeah, so yeah, I was saying that 75 years ago, some good Yorkshire folk decided and noticed the pressure that humans were putting on the natural systems and set up the trust. And now we are privileged to have 45,000 members across Yorkshire who care about wildlife, and a series of reserves that showcase both the iconic and also the invisible aspects of Yorkshire's nature, which is so important to all of us. Our staff work across Yorkshire in partnership, helping other people work and do their bit for nature as well as what we do. And the Trust itself has declared its own ecological and climate emergency. So I'm really delighted to have been invited to be part of the Commission. And the Commission has been formed, if you like, on the basis of all of our concern about climate change and the crisis that is unfolding around that. What is equally critical is the biodiversity crisis, and that is another planetary boundary that is being breached, arguably more severely and with more urgency. So we really need to tackle those two things together. The climate affects wildlife, and the wildlife and biodiversity, our natural systems, affect climate. So really important that we think about them together. And that in Yorkshire, our culture has been formed on the basis of the natural systems and the wildlife that we have lived within and on. It has formed our communities, our livelihoods, and the landscapes and seascapes that we now know and love. So our reliance on those systems to form our lives, but also create the quality of our lives, is essential. And we can't live on this planet alone, or in fact any other. So really important, from the microbial to the charismatic megafauna, that we understand that that's playing a role for us, and that we need to include it in our plans around the climate crisis and how we tackle it. The complexity of the system is humbling, and we need to learn from it as well as work within it. So siloed approaches have got us into this mess, if you like. Integrated approaches will get us out. And that's where nature-based solutions come in and are so important. Equally, as is that notion of the just transition that was just being talked about, that it's not just for people, but it's for other species and our natural systems as well, because we are reliant on each other. We can't cope with the collapse of any of them. So I hope that we will have a voice for wildlife on the Climate Commission with me and some other commissioners, and that we will be thinking about how nature-based solutions can play their part. So that's around protecting, restoring and growing nature, making sure that we've got enough space for those natural systems to function, but also the abundance of the biodiversity that underpins them and makes them so vibrant and part of our lives. And that's across our water system, thinking about natural flood management, sustainable drainage solutions, coastal realignment. It's around the farming systems and land use, around making sure we care for our soils and the productivity of our land use systems. And it's about our species then playing a role to help us, being agents of that change, for example, things like beavers, but also being the beneficiaries of what we do as well. So we continue to see the fantastic abundance of wildlife that is in Yorkshire, and we've got these fantastic foundations to rebuild from, if you like. There's still a lot of nature here, so we need to do our best to protect what we've got and really work hard to restore it using nature-based solutions that both sequester carbon, secure our natural systems, and give us a good quality of life in future. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. I think that's a really good reminder of kind of the breadth of the situation and the complexity of it as well. So we're going to turn to our final commissioner for this evening now, and that's Emma Bridge, who is Chief Executive of Community Energy England. Emma.
Thanks, Geri. So Community Energy England is an association based in Sheffield that brings together 270 organisations across England who are working to build a thriving community sector that's integrated to and truly powering a fair zero carbon energy system. So I've got just a couple of minutes tonight to talk to you about renewable energy and inclusive approaches. So we've heard tonight about the huge climate challenge facing us as a region. And renewable energy obviously has a key role to play in tackling climate change, but it's also a really effective and economically attractive way of helping to build social, environmental and economic resilience more broadly. We must ensure, however, that renewables are developed in a way that is inclusive and fair. Scientific data shows us that climate change is much more likely to negatively impact on more deprived communities, on women, Black and minority ethnic or global majority communities. And without a focus on correcting injustice and enabling inclusive approaches, work on climate change only addresses its symptoms and not the root causes. I'm so pleased that this thread has run throughout the event tonight and in this afternoon's discussions at the Commission, as sadly it's quite rare that that happens and I'm often a lone voice on this. So I feel really positive about the role of the Commission taking this forward. So my 4 minutes focuses on community energy, but most of what I'll say is applicable right across community and climate action. But for now, energy. There is an energy revolution taking place. We are moving very quickly from old, inefficient, large centralized energy systems through to smaller, flexible, local systems, from polluting fossil fuels to renewable energy and other clean technologies. Alongside this, public concern about climate change is at an all-time high. And possibly related to that, I've been receiving more queries than ever around a growing desire for local involvement in the way we produce our electricity and gas to ensure that energy is low carbon, that it's fair, and that it's affordable. If you haven't come across community energy before, it's essentially any type of energy project such as wind, solar, heat, energy efficiency that's led by the community, that's locally accountable and that has local wider benefits. So it brings communities together to take democratic climate action by generating, owning, using and even investing in their energy. So local examples include Sheffield Renewables, who's put solar PV on a number of buildings across the city. We heard about Energise Barnsley in that video. Energise Barnsley is actually the largest community and local authority partnership around PV and battery in the UK. We've also got examples of Whitby Hydro, York Community Energy, Grimsby, Calderdale, Pennine, lots of fantastic examples out there right across the region. And community energy is an incredibly effective way of not only tackling climate change directly, but acting as a trusted intermediary, also engaging people and enabling behaviour change. So effectively ensuring that climate change is done with people and not to them. There will be no one-size-fits-all system in the new energy system. People and communities must be at the heart of energy planning, as well as at the centre of climate change and green recovery policies and spending. We need solutions that fit communities, that addresses the concerns and broad inequalities that people are facing right now, as well as working towards a zero carbon future. And of course, we will fail to achieve zero carbon or even negative emissions that's been suggested in the Q&A box without the buy-in and participation of people. Indeed, behaviour change is essential for the majority of the UK Climate Change Committee recommended interventions for reaching zero carbon. So we need to bring people with us. They need to have benefits to this. It's not just about the stick. It's about how can we do this in a way that is a properly inclusive green recovery. The challenges facing us are huge, but so are the opportunities if we do this right. Regardless, it will need all of us working together, and just one way is to develop energy projects in an inclusive way that reduces costs, tackle fuel poverty, and have added social impact. You can see the level of interest coming through in the Q&A around all different ways of community-led action, businesses. Bill and many of the others have said about that social innovation and collaboration is key, and that is really what we need. Collaboration and coordination at regional level will be so important, as well as using our collective regional voice to demand greater ambition at national and international level. The launch of the Commission today is just a small but hopefully powerful step in the right direction. And you've heard from just a small handful of the commissioners here tonight, and I hope you feel heartened that we're all here and determined to make a difference. And seeing the number of people dialing in, I mean, we're still on nearly 400 people at this time in midweek evening. So I'm feeling really optimistic and excited to be working with all of you through the Commission to ensure that our region delivers a truly ambitious and inclusive climate action. And I'll leave it there and hand it back to Geri, because I'm really keen to make sure there's enough time for Q&A. Thanks, Geri.
So that was a really brilliant way to round off hearing from our commissioners. So we've got one more speaker before we go to the Q&A. So this is your last chance to get your questions in the box, and make sure you upvote the ones that you want to be asked, because we'll be coming to as many as we can. But as I warned earlier, we're not going to be able to get to all of them, although there will be chances in the future for you to ask them. Now, look, he was described earlier as the father of these climate commissions, but we're going to hand over to Andy Gouldson now, who is the director of the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. Andy.
Thank you very much. I think I need to go in a parenting class, I've said before. It's a pleasure to be here and to have got to this point, and it's really exciting to have brought such an amazing team of people together to develop this new commission. Thanks to the hard work and dedication of many of the people here tonight, we've seen a wave of climate emergency declarations go through Yorkshire and more broadly in the last couple of years. That's really, really positive. And today in our first meeting as a commission, we saw that the targets adopted by the councils and combined authorities across Yorkshire and Humber put us broadly in line with what we need to do with the science-based targets. So in terms of target setting, we've done really well. But targets have to be turned into reality, and now it's all about delivery. In the next few years, we need to turn those targets into reality, and to do that in a positive and fair way, as we've been hearing. And that's not just a job for our councils. We can't leave it to our local authorities to do all of this for us. It's all of us, all of the businesses, all of the organisations, all of us as individuals within the region that need to step up and do our bit. To do that, we have to share responsibilities, we have to pool our energy and expertise, and we have to build our capacities. Those are crucially important. And perhaps what's even more crucial is that we need a positive vision for the future of our region. A region that's clean and green and resilient, yes, but also one that's happy and healthy and vibrant and fair and prosperous. Without that positive vision, I don't think we'll get people on board. I think that, you know, we need to have a vision set out that people are excited to opt into and think that's the future I want for me and for my kids in this region. And that's the role for this commission. We're not a regulator or a delivery body. We're an independent advisory group, but we'll learn from and support the great initiatives already underway. And there are 50 or so case studies of success stories on our website already, and there'll be more coming, because there's already so much happening that we ought to celebrate and get behind and support and feel positive about. As a commission, we will feed into government locally and regionally, and we'll certainly bang the drum for climate action in Yorkshire nationally. And we hope at the COP through our climate action plan that we'll also bang the drum internationally. And we've got a lot to learn from other regions across the world in how to do this. But within the region, we can bring people together. We can breathe energy and positivity and know-how into this debate. and we can find practical, inclusive ways forward. So our role as a commission is to guide and to support and to listen and to learn and to persuade and to celebrate, and crucially also to track our progress as a region as we make this transition. Now, many of us Greenies are already alarmed, massively alarmed by the climate crisis. And anyone who really looks at the science, I think, would be. But it's crucial that we take other people with us on this journey. And this means convincing them that this is a route to a better life. And that journey won't always be easy, it's clear. And the life of the Commission won't always be easy. That there are difficult issues to address and we won't always agree. But it's better that we're here talking and listening and learning and finding practical ways forward than it is that without the Commission, we stand on either side of a chasm screaming at each other. So the first step into this process for the Commission is to prepare a regional climate action plan. That's not to duplicate all of the good things that are already happening, but to build on them and develop clear lists of the things that we can do now, of the things that we can do soon, and those that we need to build capacities to do as soon as we can. And we want your input into the writing of that plan. The Commission will be setting up a range of panels to tap into the energy and know-how that's out there, and we want that to feed into the Commission. So we already know that there will be panels on community engagement and skills and employment and finance and investment and research and evidence and more. So we hope to run a climate summit, a regional climate summit, perhaps in the early autumn, early September, to bring people together to generate the ideas that we need to shape our future. And this is so critical, as so much of this we can do ourselves. We shouldn't wait for others to take the lead or to make it possible. We could be a long time waiting. We haven't really got that time to waste. So a transition done by us and for us will be so much more powerful and with so much more buy-in and support than one that's done to us. And really that's the whole point of the Commission. This is about us as a region coming together and stepping up and taking control of our future like this. So the Commission, I think at its best, will be a catalyst that makes all of this happen. It won't do it all itself, but we're at the heart and hopefully we can enable action across the region because we need it for so many different reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And we're going to be hearing from you a bit more in a second on the Q&A panel as well. Thank you guys so much for putting your questions in. We've got 129 questions at the moment. We're not going to get through all of those, I'm afraid, but there is going to be another session on June 16th where you can put your questions if we don't get to yours today. Now look, on the Q&A panel, we have Liz Barber, we have Dan Jarvis, Beckie Hart, Bill Adams, Rachael Bice, and Andy Gouldson. So we're going to kick off, and I think one of the main questions that we've had a lot coming in on, the most upvoted, has come from Sarah Mumford, and we'll kick off with that. And it's, what does the panel feel about the Leeds City Council decision to approve the expansion of Leeds Bradford Airport and kind of the subsequent increase in carbon emissions there? We've had a couple more similar, including should the Secretary of State call that decision in? Andy, should we start with you?
Thank you. We in Leeds Climate Commission have grappled with this issue and we issued a position paper on it a couple of years ago that made it clear just what the carbon impact of expanding Leeds Bradford Airport would be. And it's really significant. There's no getting around it. It makes achieving net zero much, much harder, if not impossible. And, when it comes to what we should do about it, honestly, as a commission, we were divided. There were many of us that completely agreed that, this was taking us in the wrong direction in a very damaging way. But there were other people who had a different view, and we found it hard to come together and agree on exactly what should happen. That said, we have agreed as a commission that we will be writing to tomorrow, actually, to Westminster, to the Department for Transport, to DEFRA and to BAYS, urging national government to set a national aviation strategy which is consistent with the sixth carbon budget as a matter of priority. That is, I think, the minimum. Some of us would love to go further, but this exemplifies what these commissions are about. They are about drawing people together and accepting that we have different views and trying to find practical ways forward. So while that may not be ideal for everyone, especially from a climate perspective, that's where we've got to, and that's our position as a Leeds Commission. And today the Yorkshire and Humber Commission broadly adopted, well, it's too early for us as a commission. We've had one meeting this afternoon to form a position ourselves, but the Yorkshire and Humber Commission broadly agreed today to support the Leeds Climate Commission approach in addressing that very contentious issue.
Thanks, Andy. Liz, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Thanks, Jerry. No, not really. As Andy says, it was the first meeting today, and we discussed quite briefly this situation. And as Andy says, at the moment we align with the Leeds Climate Commission view, but we are going to be a commission that's based on data, that's based on fact, and then we'll debate the fact when the time is right. No doubt it will come up in our agendas in the future.
Thanks, Liz. For the panelists on the Q&A, I'm picking you out of thin air, so if I don't tend to call on you, do butt in. I won't be offended. Our second question is from Nick Perks, who says, what can we do to help the Commission as organisational leaders, as people in workplaces, members of charities and faith groups, and indeed just citizens? Shall we head over to Dan Jarvis? Dan, would you like to come back on that?
Thanks, Geri. I think that's a really important point. We are keen that people step up and get involved. I think the voice of the community is incredibly important in all of this. And we're looking at how we can engage with the widest possible audience that we possibly can connect with over the coming weeks and months. I also think, and I'm mindful of the fact that there are hundreds of people listening to this call, about the importance of individual members of the public raising this with their own members of parliament, because I know from experience that as a member of parliament and as a mayor, if you get a really properly, sensibly crafted email from a constituent explaining your individual and personal concerns about something, certainly from my point of view, that's something that I take very seriously. So I think for all of those people who are listening in tonight, who want to ensure that their political views are being represented by their representatives, I think use this as an opportunity to make contact, to get in touch with your MP, or there'll soon be a mayor in West Yorkshire as well, to get in touch with them, have your say, and make sure they're aware of the strength of feeling that you have. But certainly from the perspective of the Commission, we will take every opportunity to engage with the widest possible audience that we possibly can. So please get involved and give us that feedback, because we're here to represent you.
Bill, I wonder if there's anything you'd like to add there, because Nick specifically asked about what people in workplaces can do.
Did you say Beckie? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh, I said Bill, but Beckie.
I did. All right, I wasn't sure.
I wasn't sure either.
I'll butt in. What's been really interesting, just listening to just reading the sort of questions, is that there will definitely be gaps in what the Commission covers. And just reading those, there are lots of people able to fill those gaps for us. So very, very similar to what Dan said. We need to rely on other people pointing out where we're missing things, pointing out possibly where we need to prioritise things. So yes, there is lots and lots of opportunity to get involved. We all have both personal networks and business networks, and we're very keen to sort of report back to those networks what's happening and ask for their input too.
I think, Geri, from my point of view, I agree with what Dan said. People should contact the local politicians, whether that's the MP or the councillor. And I think, I would add as well that if you're in a workplace and you're a member of a trade union, then go and ask your trade union representative what they're doing around climate change and if there's any plans to talk to management, and indeed suggest ideas, because I find from a kind of lifetime of being in the union that many of the great ideas come from the workers themselves. And I know there's a factory in Bradford that saved over £200,000 a year in energy costs just through some suggestions from the shop floor. And there's also a place in a steel mill in Sweden, which I visited a few years ago, that cut their carbon emissions by 80% just by asking the operatives on the job of how to do it. So there's a lot of things individuals can do if they just raise their hand and make the point. No one's going to laugh at you. This is a serious campaign to get the job done.
Brilliant, thank you. Our next question comes from someone who is anonymous, who asks, what plans do the Climate Commission have to raise awareness of the risk of climate change to the general population? They make the point that much of Humberside will be under seawater by the end of this century if we do nothing and don't raise awareness. Rachael, we haven't come to you yet. Would you like to give us some thoughts?
Unmuting myself. This is such a challenging question, because what has been proven is that you don't scare people into taking action in their lives. You have to carefully engage, help people understand how this issue is relevant to their lives, but also understand the context, their personal context now, and what is going to be relevant going forward. So I think the Commission, we've got some fantastic community representatives as part of the Commission, actually, which is really important. And I think it will be working together to understand the socioeconomic position of different communities across Yorkshire. And I've seen in the questions, people have been making the differences. So yeah, the situation of Hull would be incredibly different to a community in a rural area in North Yorkshire, incredibly different to an urban community in the middle of Leeds or Bradford. So what we have to do is understand where there's commonality for people and help translate messages around quite complex subjects as simply as we can, but also to highlight that they are complex and we don't have all of the answers yet. We do need that engagement, as others have been talking about, to come up with solutions, ideas, the way that the community will change in relationship to this, and help to be as inclusive as we can. But I think, as I mentioned in what I was saying earlier, making it relevant to our culture is really, really important. The things that people care about, that touch their hearts, that their souls, their identity, that's where actually you really mobilise people to take action. And that's why in crisis, we often see such a mobilisation, whether that's when communities are flooded or indeed in the pandemic. I think we can learn a lot from those experiences and keep trying to bring people in, and often it's local leaders that make the biggest difference. So helping and supporting them is really important.
Brilliant, thank you. Liz, do you want to add anything on how the Commission's going to reach out to people to get them involved?
Yeah, well, there is a piece of work specifically around climate change resilience in the region, which will pick out those areas of challenge that Rachel's discussed. And there are two things that came up in the discussion today, is real engagement with communities, that sense of how does climate change affect me and what can I do and who's doing what about that. And also there's another important angle to this, which is perhaps not immediately thought of, is the kind of social stress, mental health type stress associated with concern about climate change. So, we do have to be clear about which communities are at risk and etc. through the resilience work. But equally, we have to treat, and we have to be pretty transparent, but we mustn't spread undue concern either. So there is a responsibility on us to be careful about how we position this, let people know where the challenges are, but not make them feel as though it's an immediate risk. So it's balancing it really. And the key to it, as Rachael says, is getting through the communities. And we do have a group now set up to engage specifically with communities in the right way.
Thank you. Our next question is from David Hurst, and David says, isn't the biggest issue we face in the region the energy use for heating homes and the poor quality of the regional housing stock, and what action can we take practically in the region? Dan, I think I might come to you first, because you mentioned retrofitting in particular when you were speaking earlier. If you might like to speak a bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Geri. I think David's raised a really important point. For 10 years or more now, I've been raising concerns about the scandal of excess winter deaths. It is an absolute travesty of justice that each year in this country, tens of thousands of people die in their own home, largely because they can't afford to meet the costs of their heating. So I think as a society, we need to be clear about the fact that that is completely unacceptable. And I hope that, having lived through the incredibly difficult and demanding situation that we've all encountered in recent time, it will focus our minds as a country, as a society, about how we want to do things differently in the future. And I think that the focus that we seek to place on the climate change agenda is a really incredibly important part of that. But I think it should also sit alongside other priorities. And I include within that the scandal of regional health inequalities. And it isn't right and it isn't fair that if you grow up in a more deprived part of the country, you will live less long than somebody who grows up in a more affluent part of the country. That's fundamentally an injustice. And I think part of that injustice and part of the way in which we can address both the climate change emergency and invest in the health, the well-being of our population is by investing in better and more effective insulation in people's homes. And Barnsley Council have done a lot of work on that in recent years. And I think give a sense of what could be achieved at a local level where there is the political will to support such a project. But given the nature of that particular work, it is obviously expensive and there's a limit to the amount of investment that local authorities are able to apply. So I think there are some important questions for national government about how investment in refitting houses to make them more energy efficient, to ensure obviously that we minimise emissions, but also ensure that people are able to keep warm during the colder winter months is a big political issue and one that I will certainly be continuing to raise in Westminster and in Parliament.
Thank you, Dan. Andy, how important is this housing issue to the Commission? Is it a key part of what you'll be doing?
Absolutely, it's a huge issue. Housing and mostly heating account for about a quarter of our regional carbon footprint. So there's no way we can get close to net zero unless we tackle this question. Fortunately, in a way, it's not only a carbon issue, it's also a fairness and poverty reduction and health improvement issue. So, you know, there is a lot of support from various different angles to have a retrofit scheme. Leeds City Council a couple of weeks ago set aside £100 million to retrofit 55,000 council houses across the city. A massive step in the right direction, but we need to build on that, both in Leeds and more broadly. And for me, one of the things that the Commission should consider is whether that kind of initiative could be expanded to be a regional scheme rather than a Leeds scheme. There are similar things happening elsewhere, of course, not to downplay them at all. But, you know, I think what that statement from Leeds shows is that we really need to step up and we need to intensify and accelerate our efforts. There's potential to build that more broadly to include social housing and private rented housing, and area-based schemes, I think, also have massive potential. But the biggest section of the housing market is still owner-occupiers. And so this takes us back to the point about persuading people to get on board themselves. And, you know, owner-occupiers in particular can do an awful lot to, you know, significantly reduce their carbon footprint by upgrading their homes and making them more comfortable. One of the perplexing things is people are willing to spend money on a bathroom or a kitchen. Why aren't they willing to spend the same kind of money making their home more comfortable by retrofitting it properly?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Alex Menton asks, should we stop at net? Oh, Beckie, did you want to come in? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I think that the housing point is a really important one because it will lead directly into the skills debate. So obviously we saw the government announce, I think, the Green Skills Grant possibly 12 months ago now, and one of the reasons that hasn't really been taken up is because we haven't actually got this enough skilled people to do those sort of retrofitting. So one of the reasons why it's so important that we have representatives from further and higher education on the skills individuals on the commission is so that we make sure that we join up those dots, and we are actually providing the right skilled people so they can actually help with the retrofitting of homes. So yeah, really important point.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for that contribution coming in there. Yes, Alex Fenton's question, which is, should we stop at net zero? If other developing and developed countries are lagging behind, should we aim for negative carbon emissions? I wonder if I could go to Rachael on that one first. What do you think, Rachael?
I keep hiding where my mute button is with the questions that I'm trying to keep up with. What do I think? We should do as much as we can, but I think we shouldn't underestimate the challenge that's ahead of us. And I think the various commentary is saying, you know, there are sectors that are going to be very difficult to decarbonise at all. There is a huge amount of investment that is going to be needed. So I think let's get ourselves on a solid path to meeting those targets. As Andy was saying, the targets we've set in the region will take us to the right place. The critical thing is whether they're deliverable. So that's, I think, where we need to focus our minds. And if we overperform, then gosh, we should definitely go further. But I think let's be realistic, but take really firm action in relationship to it to start off with.
Thank you for that. We've got loads of questions, so I'm going to move on to the next one so we can get through as many as possible. Mark Jones says that we all need to act to reduce the impact of climate change, and all cities and towns will need to play a role. He says that unfortunately the government is asking local authorities to bid into funds for carbon reduction schemes. So is there going to be an effort to coordinate bids across Yorkshire and the Humber? And will you be asking the government to stop this drive of forcing councils to compete for much needed resources? I think we best go to Andy on that one.
It's a really good point. I think we spend an awful lot of time competing and not enough time collaborating. And there's much to be said for all of our authorities, but all of our organisations more broadly, teaming up and making a case to Westminster that Yorkshire is organised and ready and committed. And, you know, we're at a scale with 5.5 million people where the things we can do in Yorkshire can influence Westminster, and national policy could be based on what we lead on. Wouldn't that be fantastic, rather than waiting for Westminster to act? Because, you know, there have been some high profile examples recently where they've taken one step in the wrong direction and then, you know, compounded that by going back on it later. So yeah, I would rather see us organising, collaborating and making the case for Westminster for what we want, rather than having to ask for their support for every time we want to do anything.
Hadn't unmuted myself after a year, still can't do it. Bill, I was going to come to you on that next, because, you know, collaboration and bringing people together and working together is completely your thing. And one of the other questions actually is how much lobbying of central government for additional resources will this take as well? How important is this in the Commission's work?
Well, I think it's very important, Geri. You know, just referring back to the last question about competitive bidding, you know, the leaders of Yorkshire and businesses and trade unions alike have been, you know, lobbying the government now for a long time in terms of give us the money, we'll get on with the job. But unfortunately, that's not been forthcoming from the present government or even previous governments. You know, we wanted a lot more say in the kind of decisions we take, particularly in these areas. And unfortunately, you know, we're stuck in this process where we put a bid in, and then the government decides to, you know, put the money elsewhere. And sometimes we found, you know, only this last week that it's gone to areas that may, you know, give them a political advantage. So we are where we are with it, but certainly the lobbying won't stop. I've been doing it most of my life, and we'll keep up the pressure to actually, you know, get the people of Yorkshire behind what the Commission is doing, what's necessary to alleviate flooding in Hull or Doncaster, and, you know, argue for the right solutions from government, instead of always going, you know, cap in hand, waiting for decisions from the Treasury. The actual decision should be made within the county.
Thanks, Bill. I think Dan wants to come in there as well.
Thanks, Geri. I just want to take the opportunity to completely agree with what Andy and Bill have just said. We do absolutely need to be collaborating, not competing with each other. And I think the road to COP gives us a really important opportunity to transform the way we think about this as a country. And I think for the government nationally, there is a hugely significant opportunity with a comprehensive spending review that will likely be delivered at some point in the autumn. So just a matter of months before the COP26 conference, the government's comprehensive spending review, I think, provides a once in a generation opportunity to make sure that local authorities, combined authorities, have got the resources and the powers that they need to meet the urgency of the moment. There will be some people, of course, who say that we can't afford to do that as a country, but I think what we're saying is that we can't afford not to do it.
Thank you, Dan. I think Liz would like to come in there as well.
Yes, thanks, Geri. I agree that we need to look to combine resources in the region. I absolutely agree with Dan that there's a political stance to take, and there's a lot we can do here. There's quite a lot of combined investment that we look at from local authorities, business, the utility sector, which invests heavily in carbon type infrastructure. And I think there's a lot we can do very strategically to work together and to combine resources in a way that reduces carbon and actually improves the environment. So in the video earlier on, for example, there was a Living with Water partnership in Hull, which is, you know, a partnership of three, being Environment Agency, Hull City Council, Yorkshire Water, and actually involvement from the East Riding of Yorkshire. And that's a combination of public and private money to help alleviate flooding in Hull that does not involve carbon heavy pipes and pumps. It involves the natural environment and the involvement of the local communities. So together, and thinking about different ways and different solutions, nature-based solutions, community-based solutions, we can go a long way. And I think if we can demonstrate to national government that we're using Yorkshire's resources in the very best way, they may well be supportive of further funding.
Thanks, Liz. I think some of our questions that are at the top have been answered in other answers, and I'm very conscious of the time as well. So I'm going to skip down the line a little bit just to pose a couple of questions which I think are really key to this discussion tonight, and was actually something that our first speaker, Carl Les, made clear right at the beginning, is the engagement of young people in this project. And Adele says, with community engagement, how will you ensure that young people have a voice in these panels? And Dinah says, what do you see as the role of schools and school students in the region's response to the climate emergency? Shall we start with Andy and then see where we get to?
Absolutely crucial. We had a long discussion about how best to engage with young people in the commission, and in the end decided to have a commissioner who is a school teacher who can act as our kind of lead on this agenda. And we really hope that there will be engagement with Rachael and with youth groups to feed into the climate summit, if that can happen, which we really hope it can in September. So obviously you're absolutely crucial, and you need to be central to everything that we do as we move forward. Brilliant.
Thank you, Andy. And that is all the questions we have time for, unfortunately. I know there are still over 100 sitting in the Q&A to be answered, but I really should make clear that there are going to be meetings of the Commission every quarter, and in coming months there'll be another Q&A event, a question time, where you can get all your questions in. The date I've been given is June 16th to flag up to, and I'm sure you can keep up to date with all of that by following the Commission on Twitter and going onto the website and things like that. All that's really left for me to do is thank all the panelists for their contributions. It's been really fascinating and a really good discussion at the end of the evening as well. To all our speakers for talking as well. And we really do want you to keep in touch and make sure that you get involved, whether that's, like I say, tweeting, going on the website, emailing, getting in contact, using that hashtag, giving us the feedback on the session tonight. It's really been such a great event, and thank you again for coming.